Good morning, fellow humanists. My name is Todd Kimball. It's an honor to be your MC today. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm wearing my green in the spirit. I see a little bit of green today. We have a somewhat spirited Zoom audience, as well as our live audience at the Friendly House. And a reminder that humanism is a rational philosophy informed by science, inspired by art, and motivated by compassion. It advocates the extension of participatory democracy and the expansion of an open society standing for human rights and social justice. Today's reader is one of our favorites, Joyce Lackey.
This reading is from the editors of the Week magazine, one of the issues last month, which will give us some things to think about: truth, fact, fiction, the whole range of concepts. Okay. In the early days of the week, we splayed out a smorgasbord of daily newspapers on a long rectangular table in the center of the room. In addition to the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the staff sifted through the Miami Herald, Boston Globe, Philadelphia Inquirer, Chicago Tribune, Los Angeles Times, and several news magazines in our quest for tasty articles to curate for our readers. For a news junkie, the array of fine reporting, writing, and news presentation on that table was thrilling. Tangible proof of the vital role journalism plays in our democracy. That was 2 decades ago, before Google, Facebook, and the internet laid waste to print newspapers and magazines. Now many of the websites that replaced them are also struggling and dying. As Elon Musk gloated last week, the implosion of, quote, legacy media is a boon for unfiltered, user-generated sources of information like his X, which enables the people to define the narrative. Ah, yes, the narrative. How liberating to be freed from the fusty standards of evidence imposed by journalists, scientists, historians, and other obsolete sources of authority. The mainstream media, for example, would never have told you that Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, the NFL, and the deep state are conspiring to deny Donald Trump a second term. That narrative may be easy to laugh off, but in the disinformation age, millions of citizens have adopted equally nonsensical beliefs about vaccines, election fraud, January 6th, climate change, gun violence, Ukraine, and the Great Replacement conspiracy, with much graver implications. Expertise, evidence, and nuanced perspective are out. Now you can get alternative facts and tribal dogma from simple-minded podcasters and TikTok influencers, rageaholic cable TV hosts, and reactionary billionaires. Dead and dying newspapers aren't coming back, but we need to think more carefully and critically about what's replacing them.
Thank you, Joyce. A very timely reading, and I love your button as well. Well, speaking of disinformation, those who took a look at the topic on the website for the Humanists this week saw that it was going to talk about the evolution of deceit, but we have deceived you. Today we are talking about the evolution of beauty, and we are joined by a very frequent presenter, a tremendously entertaining and knowledgeable speaker, Mr. Gordon Orians. He is a Professor Emeritus of Biology at the University of Washington. He received his PhD in zoology from UC Berkeley in August of 1960, and then he moved to Seattle and spent his entire professional career during that time serving as the director of the university's Institute for Environmental Studies from 1976 to 1986. He was elected to the National Academy of Sciences in 1989 and to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1990. Again, joining us this morning for the evolution of beauty, Mr. Gordon Orians.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I apologize for having deceived you again, but I think this will work out fairly well. At some future time, I will be happy to talk to you about the evolution of deceit. Meanwhile, the evolution of beauty is a fantastically interesting topic. The standard explanation is beauty is in the mind of the beholder. Therefore, it is idiosyncratic and uninteresting. And then let's go on to talk about something that really is interesting. Well, unless you believe that there's some abstract notion of beauty out there in the environment, waiting for something to evolve enough capacity to grab it, evolution has to be in the mind of beholders. Where else could it be? But why have beholders created a sense of beauty? Beauty doesn't come free any more than lunches do. It takes neural machinery devoted to it. And so there's always competition for neural machinery. There isn't a lot of machinery sitting around there waiting for something to do. So the concept of beauty comes at a price. So why would nervous systems, the minds of beholders, actually create the sense of beauty? What's it for? And so I'm going to talk a little. I'm not going to talk about when the sense of beauty evolved, because that doesn't have a very interesting answer. But I'm going to talk about sort of how and why. So I'm going to suggest a way to look at this in a way that concept of beauty may have been incorporated into our brains. And I'm going to imagine that we are an organism, a complex organism that has a lot of different relationships with the environment. And we move through the environment and encounter new situations. As we move, we have already some information in our brains about expectation. Some of that may be evolved in our genes, and some of it may be for the individual experiences that he or she has already had, and influences how you view what you are now encountering. And so you have what in Bayesian statistics, for those of you that know anything about statistics, I'm describing a Bayesian statistician that's walking around and has what those statisticians call the priors, your already incorporated expectations. And I'm going to way to think about it rather than just priors is what's in it for me. So you encounter a new situation and you ask, what's in it for me? Is there anything that's in it for me? And then you evaluate it, and the answer may be nothing, and you move on. But this is a way of incorporating into our brains the information that is actually useful. But the environment throws all kinds of stuff at us, and most of it is not relevant. And if we try to understand and look at all of it, we never get anywhere. So we have in our brains a lot of filtering, how to filter out stuff that isn't important. And so the Bayesian statistician that I'm talking about going around asks, is there anything in it for me this time? And so I'll try to show you how thinking about that can enable concepts like beauty to get incorporated into the minds of the beholders. So with that, let's get going. And I'm going to start with something like these little things. They were all over Horizon House here. Mostly they've been packed away for next November. But these beautiful little red things, and I've asked a lot of people, are they beautiful? Is red beautiful? And everybody says, yes, it's really beautiful. But is red really beautiful? Well, it depends, doesn't it? Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in the morning, sailor's warning. There's some priors there. The sailors from experience know that how to interpret red differently at different times of the day. And these wonderful little things that they're really beautiful. Well, when the Spaniards came back from the New World, they brought some pretty little fruits of about this size that they had seen the native Indians eating, and the Europeans wouldn't eat them. Why wouldn't they eat them? What does this mean? The Europeans had prior experience with red berries like this, and they were poisonous. It was nightshade. So their prior was bright red berries like that are poisonous. They're nightshade. And in fact, the tomato, which is what the thing was, is a member of the nightshade family. And it was not irrational for the Europeans to say, avoid this, because in general, red fruits out there are bird dispersed fruits, and they're not all that good for mammals. But at any rate, it took a long time before the tomato got incorporated into the European cuisine, and it had to be incorporated in all sorts of sauces and other things that it tasted right. And finally, now it's almost impossible to imagine, say, the Italian cuisine without the tomato. Now, there was another plant from the same family that we had no trouble with, where the flowers were white, and in fact, we weren't eating the fruit, we were eating what was stored underground, and that's the potato. Okay, so anyway, what red is, and also it's even more complicated than that. Suppose you've been having a fight with somebody, and if you look, there's there's red on the ground, and it's blood. Is it going to be beautiful or ugly? Well, it could be your opponent's blood, and you've just done him in, and that's a wonderful thing, and you could rejoice in that. But it could be your blood, in which case it's awful. So we have very, very complicated and different responses to the color red, depending on the circumstances. And that's probably why fire hydrants are now blue. They were red, remember, they were red. They've become blue, but because I think we have much simpler response to the color blue. But let's look even further. Where does red come from? Strawberries aren't red because they have a lot of red molecules in them. There's no red is the creation of the mind of the beholder. It's the creation of the brain. And what we have are several molecules of different opsins with different absorptive properties. We have 3 of them with different absorption spectra, and we put them all together, and the brain creates the sense of a color, of red. So there's no red out there at all. My mind tells me there's red and blue and all these wonderful colors all over the place, but there isn't any color out there. It's entirely the creation of the brain. It's a wonderful thing. Well, why do we do all that and create all this stuff? Well, there's much more information you can gather from the environment if you can create a sense of color. So to give you an example, suppose you buy a bird book, and you're going to say, want to identify birds, and you open the book and everything is in black and white. Good luck. Some of the birds you'll figure out very easily. Some you'll work out with difficulty, and some you'll never figure out, because the only way you can get all of that is to be able to distinguish colors. So by having the ability to create a sense of color out there, it's a much richer environment, much more information in it than seeing the environment as it was entirely Ansel Adams photographs. And I love Ansel Adams, but there's much less information there. So what the sense of color does is to create an opportunity to see much more information in the environment, to make much more complicated and interesting decisions. I had a botanist friend of mine who was red-green colorblind, and I remember we were walking up to one of these strawberry bushes, and it was full of these big red fruits. He couldn't see them. Couldn't see them at all. He walked up to them, and he had to finally touch one to see it, because they were all looking just like the leaves. So ability to distinguish or create a sense of color, which is created in the mind of the beholder, enriches the environment. And amazingly, we have 3, and these are the same molecules used by every organism in the history of life that senses light. They're the same things. They're one of the most importantly conserved things in evolutionary history. Once they were figured out, apparently there was no improvement. But Many mammals have two, and all that red of the Toreador and the cape and everything, that's for us. The bull can't see that. But birds, believe it or not, have 4 of these molecules. And they obviously have a much richer color palette than we do, but we have no way of knowing what it is. So the field guide, the color field guide says how we see the birds, which is what we need to know. That enables us to identify them. But we have no idea how birds see one another. It may be very differently than what we see them. And we may never know. We can't ask a bird, what do you see, or how do you figure it out? It's one of these things that may be forever closed to us. But at any rate, we don't know yet and have the foggiest idea how birds actually see themselves. Now, this is true not only of colored vision like that. To give another example, we could use the sugars. Well, sugars, we think sugars are sweet. Well, why are sugars sweet? So let's go to our local biochemist and ask her, where are the molecules of sweetness? And she will say, it's not there. And she will maybe show us some other molecules that we think are sweet that have totally different structure. So where's the sweetness? It's in the brain. That's something that sugar is sweet because it's nutritious, and we have evolved to be attracted to and seek out things that are good to seek out. And that's lions don't think sugar is sweet. Vultures don't think sugar is sweet. It's sweet because it's a nutrition that is important for us. So the important idea that I'm trying to express here is that the role of these kinds of emotions, like a sense of beauty, the purpose is to encourage us to seek out things that are good for us to seek out, and to avoid things that are not good for us to be around. So the sense of yuck, it's awful, that's applied early biochemistry. Don't go eating rotting stuff. And all the early prohibitions in cultures are from animal products, because you may get a tummy ache by eating rotten fruits or rotten leaves of something, but you don't get a disease because the diseases don't transfer from plants to us. But so all the prohibitions in cultures are about animal projects, because we can get sick, we can't get disease, we can get diseases from the animals that we eat. So the good news is in all of this is that the sense of beauty evolves because emotions control what we do, and it tends to get us to be attracted to, tend to be around things that are good for us to be around, that are nutritious, that help us understand and react to the different colors out there. So the brain creates color because it enriches the environment that we can see out there. We can learn much more and make much more discriminations, and we love that. We've been seeing all these wonderful pictures from the Webb telescope, all those wonderful colors out there. That's all photoshopped. There's no color out there. They put the Photoshop stuff so it looks pretty to us, but that's not what they see. There's no color out there. So that yes, it is in the mind of the beholder, but isn't it amazing what the minds of beholders actually do? They create this, and I look out there and I see all that red out there, and down deep, I know that there ain't any red out there. It's all up in my brain. But I also know it's wonderful that my brain does that to me, but how much more I can get in the way of information about the environment because I'm able to see red. Now, of course, we evolved the sense of color fairly late, and already the world was awash in organisms that were perceiving that. Insects see color, and birds do, and some fish and reptiles. And so as our ancestors evolved the sense of color, they were doing so in a world that was already motivated and moved by organisms that did have a sense of color and reacted to the environment that way. In the same way, if you bought a flower book and all the pictures of flowers in black and white, it wouldn't be terribly interesting because color really enriches. We can learn much more. So why do minds go to the business of erecting this concept thing and taking all the neuromachinery to do that? Because you can get more information out of the environment. You can learn more about it. You can make decisions that would otherwise you wouldn't have been able to make. And the world in black and white is still full of information. The world of color is full of much, much more information. So to recap a little bit, our Bayesian statistician goes around, encounters a new situation and say, well, what's in it for me? And if it's something that is in it for me, you move on that. And if it's not, you let it go, because one of the most important things to be able to do in the environment is to get rid of stuff that isn't important. And we have all sorts of machinery for cutting out stuff. And one of the problems with a modern television and stuff like this, you're just bombarded with too much stuff and you want to try to cut it all out. And we have various ways of doing that. But evolutionary, that's what's been going on as well. So the good news is that as a result of this process, we tend to want to be encouraged to be around things that is good for us to be around, and to avoid things that is not good for us to be around. And that is entirely idiosyncratic. It relates. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the sense of beauty is an ecological concept. To know what's beautiful for us or any other organism, you first ask, how does that organism live? How does it gather food? What kind of environment does it move around in? What does it eat? What enemies does it have to avoid? How does it mate and have babies? You have to ask those sort of questions to find out what a particular organism might find as beautiful. It's going to be very different for different organisms. So beauty, my message to you is, it's an ecological concept. And the view of the world I'm asking you to embrace is the ecological theater and the evolutionary play. The ecological theater and the evolutionary play. And so there's the ecological theater, and the evolutionary play acts out in that. And as I'll talk about again a little bit later, one of the problems we now face is the ecological theater is changing really, really rapidly, and more rapidly than the evolutionary play can really keep up. But let's continue on, because this process can result in things that are really, really quite permanent. They're a part of our sense of what is beautiful. And I've spent quite a bit of time working on this in terms of environmental aesthetics and tree shapes. And that's in my book, Snakes, Sunrises, and Shakespeare, How Evolution Shakes Our Loves and Fears. So I spent quite a bit of time over the last 10 years looking at the evolutionary roots of our sense of beauty with respect to a lot of environmental features, and particularly trees. And I used to give some talks. Evolutionary aesthetics, why are some trees prettier than others? So way back, I started this by going into East Africa with my wife and trying to learn about East African savannas, where we know that our ancestors lived while our brains were tripling in size and we really became human. And asking, if I had lived back then, where in that environmental mosaic would I have wanted to be? And so I spent a lot of time trying to understand where the resources were, where there's water, where the trees, and what the trees do. And we were this pretty wimpy little ape walking around in a land full amazingly powerful predators, more powerful than we are. And how do we get around doing that? And where would we be at night when they're all active and they can see and we can't? And so where did our ancestors sleep? Up in trees? And even today, other than us, there's only one primate that sleeps on the ground, the male gorilla. Everybody else sleeps either in trees or on ledges and caves. And even those weren't all that good until we tamed fire and we could put a fire at the entrance. But so trees are tremendously important. Not only do they provide shade, but we slept in them over most of our history, and only recently have we figured out how to be safe on the ground, and that's because we learned how to domesticate fire. So I spent a lot of time then looking at the shapes of trees in the environments that I thought provided the best sort of resources. And these turn out to be the spreading acacia trees. And every brochure about having a trip in East Africa, you have these wonderful spreading acacia trees. You'd think that's all there is in East Africa. Well, that's only a very small part of the environment. There's a lot of other places that don't have trees like that. And those have the lesser, but those are the trees that are the places that have combination of water, places to escape at night, and other resources that are going to be common. So what makes a really pretty tree is related to the kind of environment in which it would have been very good for our ancestors to have functioned. So we did a lot of experiments with showing pictures of trees and asking people to rate how attractive they were. And it turns out that the spreading layering was really, really important, but turned out, much to our surprise, how quickly the tree bifurcated, how close to the ground it bifurcated. And that turned out to be very, very positive. And what that enables, that tells you it's climbable. And I remember when my wife and I first started working in East Africa, and we very quickly learned out how easy it was to walk up on a lion and not see it, a lion in the grass you could get really close to. So I did something that I've never done in walking in the woods here. I looked around at the trees and which ones could I climb easily? And luckily I'm here and I never had to climb them. But this turns out, and in tests with what people today in our modern society like, they think that a tree that bifurcates early from close to the ground, which does indicate that it's climbable, affects the beauty. So it's possible then to look at and see how that sense has influenced what we think. And I did a lot of work then in Japanese gardens, which are primarily based on tree and shrub shape. And one of the things that they have done, and I've made a lot of measurements about this, is to change the Japanese pines, which grow up like normal pines do, into things that look a lot like African acacias, and made a lot of measurements there. And what the aesthetics of trees in Japanese gardens is, they're made to look a lot more as though you're walking in an African savanna. So they're deep evolutionary roots on these sorts of things. And I think the way we see the environment today has deep roots based on these kind of business of habitat selection. Where do you want to be? Where is it good to be? And what is the nature of the vegetation when there? And an important characteristic of all these environments that dominates how we see them are trees. And that's why it's so important what we're thinking of doing now, and putting more trees here and there, and getting trees for aesthetic purposes, even though we're not going to have to climb them anymore to get away from any danger. So again, the sense of beauty is an ecological concept. And to understand anything about what an animal considers as beautiful, you got to ask a bunch of ecological questions. And let me illustrate that by a story. I had a daughter living in Vancouver, BC, and she had a son who would come down, and he loved to have me read to him, and I loved to read to him. And one of the books that he wanted me to read to him every time was called Alaska's Three Bears. And Alaska has three bears, black, brown, and white. And here's the story. Three bears, one black, one brown, one white, were in the woods, and they happened to come upon one another, and they were walking together in the environment. And they came to a little glade full of butterflies and berry bushes with blueberries all over the place and sunny. And the black bear said, "Oh, that's beautiful. I'm going to stay here." And so he left, and the other two bears looked, "Oh, doesn't look terribly beautiful for us, so bye-bye," and they went on. After a little while, they came to a stream with salmon on it and jumping and so. And the brown bear said, "Oh, is this beautiful? Look at all those. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to hunt salmon." And he said, "This is the most beautiful place I've seen." And the polar bear looked at it and said, "Doesn't look very beautiful to me," and went on. And later on, the polar bear comes to the seashore, and there's ice out there and seals on it. And he said, "This is wonderful." And he jumps into the water and goes out hunting seals. Okay, so this is a little story, but it captures the element. What is beautiful depends on the ecology of the animal. And Alaska has three bears, and they have three very different habitat selections. And of course, I've invented what they think is beautiful. And that's something we don't really know, because we can't ask the bear, "How do you feel about it?" Well, we have no way of answering that. But we know that all these animals have a lot of emotions. They're just not accessible to us. They may never be. We don't know how to ask that question. How do you feel? So so beauty is an ecological concept, an evolutionary concept. And unless you see it that way, it's hard to make any sense out of what you're looking at. So when did it all start? As I indicated, I was less interested in when did beauty start. But it started way back somewhere in evolutionary time, because early organisms were making choices about the environment. They had to select where to go, what to be attracted to, what to avoid. So these sort of situations go way, way, way back in evolutionary time. And so it is very likely that some sense of beauty evolved very early in the evolution of life. It won't leave any traces. We'll never really know. But then we see it, and we can see that all the other organisms around us that are living in these complicated environments, they have their own sense of beauty, what they're attracted to, what they think is wonderful, what they avoid, the yuck experience. So that almost certainly beauty, of course, is an evolved concept. There was nothing in the physical environment, that it is what it is, and gravity isn't beautiful; it just is. But so beauty is something that has evolved with life, and it has evolved as a way of increasing the ability to operate in the environment, to seek out places that are good for you to seek out, to avoid places that are not good for you to be in. So that this is my message to you. And the good news is that the process tends to make us want to be and to be attracted to and be around things that are good for us to be around, and to avoid places that are not good for us to be around. And all of this happens without our understanding anything at all. all of the wonderful things that were created by plant and animal breeders. All they knew, they didn't understand anything about genetics. They didn't know anything. All they knew was that offspring tend to resemble their parents. That's all they knew. But that's all they need to know. Just think of what animal and plant breeders have done to create this amazing variety of stuff. And almost every, most of the organisms that were domesticated long ago. We got some new stuff, but they did all of this and they didn't know anything about it. And that's the wonderful thing about all of this, is that it can go on and we don't need to know what it was. And obviously the people who are doing all this artificial selection didn't know anything about genetics. But the point was they didn't have to. The wonderful stuff they did was all they knew. One thing: offspring tend to resemble parents. So there's the evolution of beauty. It is in the mind of beholders. It's a wonderful thing that the minds of beholders do. And it's been adaptive. It has helped us live better lives. It has helped us be around and want to be in places that are good for us to be, and to avoid the places where it's not good for us to be. And a blind process of natural selection going on without our understanding that it could achieve something as wonderful as that. It's pretty good news, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon, for an enlightening talk. You always gives us so much history, so much imagery, and I really appreciate the presentation today.
Thank
I
you.
guess I will start out with the first question. Gordon, my first question is this. We know that in human history, humans have found various body types, different things beautiful. Back in the day, we appreciated a more Rubenesque stature. And now we might like the thinner type. So kind of talk about the evolution of beauty within species and what might cause those changes.
Well, that's a very good question, and one, of course, that we've seen this variation. And again, it's when men are looking at women, what is it they're bringing? What is their expectation? And an important thing that faced our ancestors was starvation. And we know that starvation was a big thing overall. And even today in Latin America, where I've done a lot of work, if you want to compliment somebody on a baby, you say, "Que gordo está," how fat he is. And even you go into the Psalms, and you find, "Yea, my soul shall rejoice in fatness." Huh? Doesn't sound very attractive to us now, but now men are looking at women. Well, we can still see it here at the Horizon House. We have a large number of employees coming from all over the world, and a lot of them are much more rotund and so in those cultures, men are still looking maybe at women as, how good is she going to be to bear kids? And therefore having resources that look good as you're able to then support a pregnancy and a kid. But modern in Western societies, and men are looking at women, they're not thinking about that at all. What's in it for them is something very different, and therefore we have different standards. So I think you can understand that in terms of what it is your expectation, what you're hoping to get from an association with a woman you're looking at. And in our society now, very rarely are men looking at, is she going to be good at raising babies? Does that help?
That does help. And the next part of my question, I think, would be difficult to verify, but I'm curious if you have any opinion. What about other species and how they view attractiveness? Is there any evidence that they have changed their tastes over time?
Well, there's some evidence of say, birds singing in cities, singing at higher pitches than they do singing in the country, because the background noise is low pitch here in the cities. And birds adjust their singing to be able to be distinguished against the background noise. And so we know that the birds species that are singing in urban environments sing at higher pitches. So they're adjusting their behavior. And so, yes, it's going to go on, because a sense of beauty is a snapshot in time. That's part of my message, that there isn't something this we got it and that's what it is forever. It's a constantly evolving thing, and it's going to be somewhat with respect to for birds, although we know much less about it than other animals, how they're adapting to the kind of environment we're providing and the resources. I mean, I sit here at Horizon House and look out the little garden below, and we have barred owls that are coming in now, and they love the city, and there's rats down there, and they've learned that, and they're obviously in an environment that is totally unlike anything they've been in before. Whether they see these tall skyscrapers as tall Douglas firs, I don't know, but they're adapting to that. So the sense of beauty that we see now is a snapshot in time. And if I were to give this talk 20 years from now, I would have probably said some different things.
Sounds great. Thank you. We have 2 questions from the friendly house, so let's go to question number 1.
Hello. You've talked a lot about our sense of natural beauty, or our sense of what's beautiful in nature. But so much of what human beings do is our attempts to create beauty through art. And I wonder what you thought the evolutionary advantages of creation of beauty through artistic works played in human evolution.
Well, that's a very good question, and we do that all the time. When we create parks and gardens, we're creating what I would call aesthetic environments. They're there for, it's lovely to be in them. We want to enjoy relaxing in them. And we use our evolutionary sense of what beautiful. Basically, what a park is a savanna, is an African savanna with spreading trees and grass underneath. And it looks a lot like the ancestor. So, and when we use the beauty of flowers, for example, we start competing with them. We have flower shows, and my dad grew dahlias and got away. And so you get the winner, and there's the person with the ribbon by the dahlia. Well, the dahlia doesn't have any idea what's going on. It doesn't know that it's in a flower show, but my dad got special award by doing, and the same is true of dog and cat shows. You get I've watched some dog shows, and the dogs don't have any idea what's going on. They don't know there's a dog show. They don't know somebody's getting an award. They've been trained to do something very, very unnatural things, such as letting an absolute stranger come up and open your mouth and look at your teeth. No dog is ever going to do anything like that. So it has to be really difficult. So we gain status, and so what the winner of the dog or the cat show or the dahlia show, it's not the plant or the animal, it's the owner who's getting enhanced glory because of it. So we use the pleasure that we get from different things, from plants and animals and environments, to create stuff, and we enhance our own status with respect to other individuals by so doing. And when you're in a highly social species like us, our survival and success depends much less on what we know than who we know. And that's so important, and we all see that in how we behave. So we use these, what we see is how we enhance and create flower shows and various other things, environments. They're building on the sense of beauty that evolved, I think, there in the African savanna. And I think what we're doing to enhance is, to me, fairly predictable, given the environment in which where we lived when our brains tripled in size, and we became human. And we know about that environment. If we were dumped back in the environment where our ancestors were, we'd probably feel pretty much at home. It hasn't changed that much. So anyway, the legacy of our relationships with the environments is what we build on and embellish when we come to the social enhancement of our relationship with plants and animals.
Yes. You mentioned your friend who was colorblind. I had a friend who was colorblind, and he told me that humanity has the proper percentage of people who are colorblind because colorblind people, we need some because colorblind people have a better ability to detect motion in a complex environment like a forest or a grassland or something. And I thought, well, yes, but evolution doesn't really do that kind of thing because if somebody's going to be the motion detector for the crowd, he's going to need to have a different kind of a voice, and you don't want him to have red hair, maybe, or there's a whole package of things he's got to have besides colorblind. And I don't think evolution has a way to build packages of traits like this. Is that true? What do you think? Is specialization of roles maybe a little more complicated than what evolution can help us with?
Well, that's a very good question. I think you're fundamentally right because, well, development, of a complex organism like us from a cell, which has no structure, is an extraordinarily complicated thing with things unfolding. And, every cell in my body has got the same genes. Brain cells, gut cells, nervous cells, they're all have the same genes. And what has created all the differences is when and how you employ them, turning them on and turning them off. So this is an unbelievably complicated thing. And not surprisingly, it makes mistakes. So the amazing thing is that it does as well as it does, but given the complications of that, it's not surprising that sometimes there are mistakes. So red-green colorblind, which is a very specific thing, and my friend, the red-green colorblind people see all sorts of other colors. It's not that they don't have a sense of color. It's just that one that they can't discriminate. That's my sense of it. Is just that's an unfortunate mistake. And it may convey something else as well. I don't know, but I think we just need to get accustomed to the fact that a very complicated developmental process like this, taking a single cell and making somebody like me or you, that it should work flawlessly is something you couldn't possibly expect. I think it's amazing that it does as well as it does, and okay. There's some mistakes, then they may be socially important, and we need to be sensitive and figure out how to deal with them and help people who happen to come out on the short end. But I just think a lot of this is just their development doesn't go flawlessly.
Hank, you've been very patient in our Zoom audience. Let's go to you with our next question.
Well, first, thank you for the talk. And it leads me to a basket full of questions, but I'll start with this one. Do you think that on occasion, people may walk around asking, what's in it for us, rather than what's in it for me? And if you think they do sometimes do that, how might that affect beauty?
Okay, that's a lovely question because we are highly social. I tend to think that the dominant thing when we go, what's in it for me is the dominant thing. But I'm certainly open to the possibility that you may be asking what's in it for more than me, and the first thing would be the close relatives, my family, the things that are around, and we have remarkably extended parental care, The good news is it's wonderful. We see a lot, and the bad news it never ends. And so we have an enormous amount invested in the welfare of other individuals around us. And when we see a situation, I think it's probably fairly common that we'll ask, what's in it for the other people that I care a lot about? Now, how far we extend that to people that I don't have any particular engagement with, I think we have limited ability to do that. And that's part of the problem of trying to engage and get a complicated society to work, because it's very hard for us to do that. But I think you're absolutely right that it's often going to be what's in it for more than just me. Yeah, I think you're right.
And do you think that relates to beauty at all?
That's a question I have to, it's a very good question that obviously I haven't thought enough about. But well, good. That's what Q&A should do. Should challenge me. I'm grasping for time here, aren't I? But, well, I think so, because again, it's the associates that are really important, and I think it can extend. Obviously, I haven't thought enough about that, but I think you've raised a very important thing that I obviously spend more time thinking about. So thank you.
Well, we all need something to do, so you're welcome.
Thank you, Hank. We will likely come back to you with other questions if we have time, but let's take care of the questions at our friendly house audience. Questioner number 3.
That's me. Thank you very much. You agree with the physical fact that there is a spectrum?
Yes.
Oh, and you agree that things reflect at different wavelengths?
Yes.
Okay, when we take a picture of something, I think this might have to do with what you were talking about, the machinery. We have developed, developing a negative, developing a photo comes out with the colors, the proper colors. But we invented that. Is that what you're saying? That those colors don't really exist?
Yes, as far as I'm able to tell, there's no color out in the world. There's just different wavelengths. And the sense of color is something that brains do with that and create the sense of color. So I look out in the world, I see all this color. And and it's wonderful because that's what enables me to get so much more information out of the environment. But strawberries aren't red because they got a lot of red molecules. There's no red molecules in strawberries. Red is entirely up in the brain, but it's created from wavelength differences. It's created from physical reality. But the sense of color is something that brains create out of that. So it's based on physical reality. Yeah, it's not an imagination, but the sense that I see color out there rather than just different wavelengths is.
I do understand that space photography, they do put in the color. They put the color in, and so it's mostly shades of gray.
It's all photoshopped. It's all photoshopped.
Okay, thank you.
It really makes it pretty, doesn't it? But it would be kind of dull looking at them, and we thought these wonderful images. Well, that's all photoshopped. There's no color out there.
Yeah, we do things to appease our audience. Let's go to questioner number 4 at the mic.
Thank you, Gordon, for a fascinating talk. I wonder if related to Hank's question, maybe part of that beauty is that you mentioned that food is one of the things that we find beauty in, and that would matter to the people around us and the people we care about a great deal. But my question is, does this give us any insight into why people and also animals are susceptible to addiction? We get to sugar and we don't want to stop. And I just saw a video of, I know the birds get drunk on berries, and I just saw a video of a moose that had gotten drunk on some rotten fruit. So why is that helpful in an evolutionary way?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. And the thing is that we evolved, as I mentioned, with starvation very much in mind. And always when there is a lot of extra food available, we take it in. And we're all ready for the next starvation movement, which doesn't come. And the reason we don't have the brakes on it is there was never any evolutionary reason for them because we never could overconsume that way. And we now got the problem, we've created a situation where there's always an abundance of food around. And shortage never comes. And I just think we're evolutionarily poorly equipped to say no when all this wonderful stuff is around all the time. And as I mentioned, if you want to make a lot of money, just do another book on how to lose weight, because it'll be a bestseller and it'll never work. But it's a real problem. I face it. I never had trouble gaining weight until I got into my 70s, and then I realized this unlimited consumption that I enjoyed most of my life no longer works, and it's hard. It's hard to turn down really good stuff all the time. And so evolution hasn't prepared us with any breaks because there was never any need for them, I don't think.
Thank you.
I mean, it's too bad. We could make a lot of use out of a lot of breaks,
I believe we have question number 5 at the mic at the friendly house there.
Hi. Well, my doctor said that if it tastes good, don't eat it. But
good luck with that. How well have you taken his advice?
When I was well, this is a question about the opposite of beauty, I think. When I was a kid, I watched a documentary about lions, small lions that were, I don't know, less than a year old. And they ran across a troop of baboons and they chased them up the tree. And the big male baboon hopped to another tree, and most of the larger baboons hopped, but the littler ones went higher up, and these 3 lions climbed the tree and got quite a ways up into the tree. And finally, the male baboon been making all kinds of noise that didn't scare off the lions. So he leaped back onto the tree and peed all over the lions, and all 3 of them fell out of the tree, just thump, thump, thump. And I was amazed, why they weren't afraid of the baboon, but they were afraid getting peed on for some reason.
Well, I mean, being peed on is very unpleasant. It can cause you illness. The big male baboons can actually take on, but the main predator are leopards, and they really can't even take on the leopards. So they're not a formidable predator for the lions. I mean, and the reason the male baboons were up in the trees and they didn't attack the lions is that there would be no point; they would lose. And one of the basic rules in evolution is don't start fights that you're likely to lose, because it's very expensive to lose fights. So the best weapon they had was to pee on them. So the lions were not that afraid of male baboons because they were not a real threat. And even leopards, which are quite a bit smaller and the main predator on baboons, can't. The male baboon is a dangerous animal, and leopards are very careful about attacking them. But usually they win because they're enough bigger. But the case of the lions, the male baboons pose no threat. There's nothing they could do by baring their teeth that would make the lions unhappy. But you had the one weapon you had left.
I very, very, very much enjoyed your presentation today. That was really fun. My question though is, beauty now is changing so quickly. What is beautiful to me is often not beautiful to my daughter, and certainly not to it's changing so quickly. What's beautiful because of the internet and the differences in music and, that it's, so how is that going to change what is beautiful evolutionary? I'm just curious about that.
Well, it's a very good question. And as I indicated, the concept of beauty is a moment in time. This is constantly about, there is no external standard out there that, the Greeks were trying to find one, and because they didn't understand evolution, they didn't have any idea. And there's been a lot of attempts by people who didn't understand evolution to come up with something like that. They've always failed because there isn't anything out there like that. It's always something that evolves, and it's what's in it for me now, not what was in it some other time. And as I indicated, if I were to give this talk 10 years from now, it would probably be fairly different, because this, the sense of beauty is an evolutionary concept, and what we're getting is a snapshot of what's now. And I can't tell you what it's going to get like, but as you can say, it's very, very different. I mean, even watching my grandkids now, they have a sense of beauty that you think that's beautiful. Okay, I guess so, but that's what it's always going to be there. You don't arrive, okay, we finally figured it out.
Right.
We got a snapshot in time, and that's all it's ever going to be. That doesn't make it any less interesting to me, but it makes it maybe even more interesting, because it's exciting. You never get the answer. There isn't a final answer. And people who have been looking for the final answer of a sense of beauty have been chasing a ghost for a very long time. And they've never found it because it isn't there.
It isn't there. Yeah.
It isn't there.
No.
But that's what we're living with. And it sort of makes it exciting. But, because tune in tomorrow, it's going to be different.
Right. And I guess it's our reason that we have to stay open to what comes next, rather than closing the door. And
easy for us to think, okay, we've got to figure it out now, and why don't you kids get it?
Right.
But they know better. But that's what is exciting about it, is that all the non-evolutionary senses about beauty. I've read a lot of the stuff, and it doesn't get anywhere, because you're looking for something, or a standard, some excellent thing out there that simply doesn't exist. And that's why we got to look at our kids and other people things changing, and all these aesthetic questions. There are no answers. Abortion can be women's rights or murder, and I can't tell somebody who sees it differently. And when I was involved in the court cases with the spotted owl, and I got to know the woman who was arguing against me, off record, and you talk, and she could not understand, really couldn't understand, why would you not want to cut down beautiful trees and all the lumber you could get because there was an owl there? Mm-hmm. And I couldn't tell her that she was wrong, because she wasn't. I get it, but that's the nature of these things, which makes them difficult, but also exciting. But if we want them to be something fixed like that, we got the answer now, let's go on to something else, we're going to be disappointed, because I don't think that's what it is.
It's a spectrum, and all people are on different spots on that spectrum.
Yeah, and what if I were living in a different culture, I would probably have a different sense. I mean, it's there's no reason to expect it to be the same everywhere, and that's what that means. It is in the mind of the beholder, but that it isn't idiosyncratic. It makes sense. You start to answer these ecological questions, and then it makes sense of what the black bear and the brown bear and the white bear found beautiful.
Right.
Which, until you know something about the ecology and the and part of the problem now, of course, is that the ecological theater is changing so fast.
Right.
And the evolutionary play isn't going to catch up. It can't. And we're going to have to deal with how we handle some of these things when evolution isn't going to bail us out. It's
Yeah,
just
and we're not real quick we're
not
quick
doing,
thinkers.
we're not doing very well at that. It's obvious. And I don't think there's a simple solution to that because, you know, again, these aesthetical questions don't have definite answers.
Right.
I mean,
Thank you, Gordon. Really enjoying
it's a form of
this idea.
torture or murder, and take your choice. You know, I mean, I have my value there, but you know, I can't say that somebody else is wrong. That's not the nature of those questions. Get changed as people's opinions change, and beauty has those characteristics, but it's grounded in something that enables you to make a living better because you are attracted to stuff that it's good to be around and avoid the yuck that's going to kill you.
Thank you.
Well, a few comments. First of all, as far as the photographs from space, especially when James Webb came out, and basically all the stuff they're getting from James Webb is not in the visible light spectrum. And a lot of people asked about, you know, where's all the color coming from? Is it just Photoshop? But the scientists were very defensive on that, and they're like, well, actually, we have mapped all of the light frequencies based on the science of what they must have been looking like when they were originally emitted, and then they did the appropriate transforms on the frequencies to make it look as though they would have looked kind of if you had been up close. So it's not quite Photoshop, but it's you know, I take your point.
Yeah.
But as far as the question about that was asked earlier about what we've done with art, I mean, if you're walking through an art museum, and one person says that's a very beautiful abstract painting there, it seems like it's no longer tied very closely to survival or something. Certainly, if it's a picture of a beautiful woman or something, yes, you can you know, say that that's related to you know, procreation, etc. But often it's not even recognizable. It seems that what art has become is taking that very basic emotion that we do feel in these natural settings and trying to abstract it to the point where some collection of colors and stuff on a piece of paper might evoke similar emotions without having that connection. Do you see that in that way?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting. One of the Pollock's things, one of the things that mathematicians have shown that his paintings are all fractal, which is to say you consider different levels and it's the same thing. And our mind looks for patterns. And one of the things that our minds can do with the Pollock is find a pattern. And that's something that we do, and we feel good if we could find a pattern. And people went through his lab, you know, and some of the paintings he never showed, and the mathematicians had looked, and they weren't fractal. Now, whether Pollock understood fractals, I don't know. But again, he almost certainly had a sense that you could extract a pattern. And that's why his things turn out to be interesting, because our mind is able to do what our mind really wants to do, find a pattern out there that we can relate to. And now what's happening with a lot of other art is, I mean, and I have a lot of trouble with a lot of modern art because I can't find the patterns that I want, but that's probably, I don't know the minds of people that are looking at those now and what they're finding in it, but art has always been, you know, a fascinating thing as to what people want to look at. I mean, landscape didn't become an object of painting until relatively recently. There was no interest in landscape. and it first appeared a little bit of background to a religious scene. And finally, then with Constable and others, it became something that you would paint on its own, a landscape. But that's fairly recent. And most of the evolution of art, nobody would have looked at a landscape. So this is really a complicated and evolving thing. And all I've tried to do in this talk is to give a few guideposts as to how our minds might have evolved to deal with this. Have I given you the answers you want? No. I hope I've helped you think about it. And if I've achieved that, that's all I could hope for.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
Very entertaining. Let's go to a question from our Zoom audience. We got time for one or two more questions. Let's go to Hank in our Zoom audience.
Yes, thanks for letting me have a second round. First of all, I want to congratulate the story of the baboon and the lions because it does illustrate how trickle down actually works. But I want to ask you about the experience of awe, which seems to me to be right sort of beside beauty. Typically, we can get a sense of awe if we have tremendous power or tremendous distance. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how they may be related and how they would fit into the analysis that you provided.
well, our minds are and we evolved with ancestors that never moved far from you. You died very close to where you were born. You never knew about anything anyway. So our minds are really good at short-term, small scale. And we're really superb at that. And what has happened is that we're expanding. And it's not clear that our ancestors could have made any use of anything else. You know, what would they have done with, if they'd have known what was over in the next valley or two valleys away? Would it have done them any good? Probably not. But one of the things that has happened is that as we have gotten more and bigger brains, and we've started asking these questions: where did we come from? Where are we going? And so we as far as we know, we're the only organism that asks those questions, and it's the ability to ask those questions and think about them seems to be related to the increased computing power of our brains. And then we start thinking about, you know, we can ask questions such as, what happens when I die? And as far as we know, we're the only organism that asks that question. And the question is, what does happen after we die? And one of the things that seems to me have motivated a lot of religious stuff is we don't want to die. We're afraid of dying. We don't want to die. And so what organized religion has done, well, first medicine does death delay, and then organized religion does death denial. And you go to the cathedrals of Western Europe, and this is go in there and we're going to transport you to the eternal life. And I can remember, I was a kid, grew up in Wisconsin, and all I asked for a building was that wall-to-wall flooring and the roof didn't leak. And I never had any. Then I went as a Fulbright fellow to England, and the first day I walked into Canterbury Cathedral, I about died. I had never thought that a building could do that. And obviously the people that composed these were able to build on a sense and create something that you and I would then describe as awe. I was there in a sense of awe. I mean, I was just stunned. And I had never any idea that a building could do that to me. But I also know that music can do it. And I remember the most stunning awe feeling I had was the first time I heard the Liebestod at the end of Tristan und Isolde. And that came forth, and I just about died, the intensity of the emotion. So composers of art, music, buildings, whatever, can build upon that and tap and get that sense of awe. And that's in part of what art and music does. But
We like to reward our live audience with the last question of the day. Thank you, Hank. Let's go to Roy at the Friendly House.
This is a small story about a question about color blindness. And I used to be a clinical engineer, and I had hired a new biomed, and he was having trouble fixing a nurse call system. And I went back there, and then he had these wires scattered all over the place. And then he asked me if this one wire was more red or more green. And I thought, oh no, he's not going to be able to fix this nurse call system. So I got him a piece of vellum that was red and another one that was green, and he could hold them in front, and he could tell by whether it made the wire darker or lighter.
yeah,
And so he got by, and then he somehow ferreted out that there were two other guys in the hospital who were red-green colorblind, and they used to hang out together, and I would hear them talking about color. And one day they were having a big argument, and I stopped by, and they had salt and pepper shakers out, and one was white and one was gray, and they were arguing whether the gray was more green or more red, and I couldn't answer that.
but these are all variations on the theme of what the ability to perceive a sense of color out in the world does for us. How much better we can function having a sense of red. And the brain does that. I mean, I know there's no red out there, but I see it red, and I'm happy to see it red, because boy, does that enrich my experience of the environment, what I can learn about it, how I can deal with it. And that's the whole point of the evolution of color vision.
Thank you so much, Gordon, for an enlightening talk and a spirited Q&A. Really enjoyed it today. Always good to see you. Always enjoy what you share with us.
And I always enjoy talking with you people. You're a fun bunch. And I really enjoyed last fall when I came down and actually spent time with you. So you're very special people in my mind.